Activate.
All right, everybody. Hey, welcome back to This Pink Cloud. We are a show that is about multiple pathways to recovery. All that good stuff. I am DJ Kelly Reverb, and I am a Rispus.
Hold on, you didn't give me a gap.
Huh?
Say it again. You didn't give me a gap.
Hold on. I am DJ Kelly Reverb. There we go. the canned flatulence. Anyway, always a pleasure to have. Speaking of canned flatulence, always a pleasure having Mr. Chad Lamons, everybody.
Woo!
It smells like shit in here.
I just tried to press a bunch of buttons.
Sweet, that was fun, dude. You just turned into somebody on the spectrum there with your plate spinner, dude.
I'm telling you, that is one of the best ideas that I've had as like something funny to do, is to just go into places and start a Yelp account where you start giving reviews, but you just fart when you're in there, and you give them a 5-star review, and you're like, "Oh, the food was great, it just smelled like shit."
And no, but he should be. I say you should make the title Mr. Brown Air, like do
Just go into places, fart, leave him a good review, but be like,
awful.
Smelled like shit.
Smelled like shit.
Kind of shit show are they running in here?
Some guy farted in my seat
everywhere.
So people go to your account history and see that
everything, every review you do is
like,
glowing.
I wonder if this place really smells like.
Right.
You got Yelp reaching out to you.
Love
like,
the atmosphere, but it just smelled like shit. It smelled like someone fresh shit.
Anyway. So I'm happy you could make it in, Mr. Mike Munzell, everybody.
Yeah.
Woo!
And can we get the fart again?
Hey, Jamie, pull up the fart.
Jamie, pull up the fart. There we go. But thanks for coming in, man. I know you and Chad actually just met recently at a recovery meeting.
We've seen each other at several different doctor's appointments around the area.
Right?
Yeah, for our
the gynecologist.
For our late onset progeria.
Your late onset progeria.
Yeah.
Nice. But so let's hear a little bit about your backstory and from whence you came.
From whence I came.
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you all for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for
Beautiful
being
day. Got to ride the bike down here.
Lovely.
So.
Jamie, pull up bikes.
pull up Mike's Harley.
So where it started,
well, how old of a guy are you?
So I'm 28 years old.
Okay.
I've been sober since April 30th of 2015.
Okay.
That is, right now, almost 9 years?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Look
almost
at you.
9
Wow.
years. So yeah, I was 19 when I got sober. So
let's dial it back and tell the story of a little bit about you growing up then how it went awry.
So coming from the recovery point, I don't have any kind of blame that I can place.
Yeah.
So growing up, I had two parents that were together and they loved each other and they loved me. I had a younger sister. I have a good relationship with her. Obviously, it, for a time, wasn't that way. Mm-hmm. But yeah, early life was very much, block parties, the 4th of July.
Right.
It
wasn't like any serious trauma.
Yeah, there was no turmoil or trauma. I never had to,
You weren't abused.
Yeah. There wasn't, and I had friends growing up that, and I'll get into that. But yeah, so it was never, it was good. It was easy.
Yeah.
My dad was a United pilot for 33 years. Right?
Oh, nice.
And so,
what part of town did you grow up in?
So I was born in Chicago when he was flying out of O'Hare, and we lived there for a few years. But where I grew up was Northern Virginia.
Okay.
Maybe 45 minutes outside of D.C.
Tobacco country.
Yeah.
Right.
Not quite. Kind of halfway in between D.C. and where beef country starts.
Right. Gotcha.
So,
Jamie, pull up beef country.
All right.
No, it was literally smack dab in the middle. 45 minutes and I'm in the city, and 45 minutes and I'm at my buddy's house that I met at 4-H camp, mind you.
Right.
And the closest gas station to his house is like a 20-minute drive past like 3 or 4 different cattle ranches.
Oh yeah.
But then where I grew up was not okay. and I don't know if it's a real word. I don't think that it is, but
Well,
almost sub-rural.
okay.
Right. And so, like, when I think of suburbs, you know, the houses are on a quarter acre. They're within spitting distance. I grew up in a neighborhood, but all the land had, or all the plots had at least a couple or few acres.
Yeah.
You know, and you couldn't hear your next door neighbors.
Right.
Right.
I think we can landmark this moment right now that Mike just made up a new word. Go ahead and say it for us.
We're gonna go with sub-rural.
I think that's a term. But
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna use. I've used it loosely.
Lean into
Well,
it.
now it's on the
throughout my
internet,
life,
dude, so
yeah.
you can't get rid
Yeah.
of it.
That's true. That's true. And if it's on the internet,
It's
it
true.
is true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
100%.
So anyway, yeah, I mean, I grew up in kind of a small town. You know, not small town, but not suburban.
Sure.
Literally right in the
Right.
middle, in between that. But so from an early age, man, and I'll get into this here in a little bit, kind of from the recovery standpoint. So, you know, I played sports. I played music. I was always encouraged to do extracurricular things. From a personal improvement standpoint, I guess.
Right.
Right, not like encouraged to go in and just hang out with friends.
Right.
But I was also, I had an attitude problem, to put
Okay.
it lightly, right? Like I was just an angry kid.
Were you a bully?
You know, I wasn't.
Okay. All
But
right.
like at home, like I was angry, and my two loving parents were
Right.
You're the problem.
Slow
Dad's
your-
the problem.
Slow your roll,
pissing
kid.
me off. Yeah,
Right?
dude. And I mean, like, bro, like I'd throw a phone. I'd classic Kyle, like punch a hole in the wall type of.
It almost
home
sounds
life.
like you were like a spoiled, like only child kind of vibe.
Yeah,
but
it feels like that very much. But you know, I know, obviously looking back, and even at the time, like my parents did they exerted effort into not spoiling my sister and I. Right?
Sure.
And I remember growing up almost feeling like one of the poorer kids.
Okay.
And it wasn't until a little bit later that I got a little bit more perspective on that.
Right.
But it was always just like, I mean, from an early age, all I did was just want. You know, and I was ungrateful and I was angry at just everything.
You were an entitled little piece of shit.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And so, about as early as they could grow in, I had sticky fingers, and like I couldn't go into a store and keep my hands to myself. I'd be just kind of stealing whatever,
Right.
Almost like just for the sake of
Just
taking
for the
something.
rush.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not even. It almost wasn't even a rush. It was just simply a compulsion.
I deserve this.
Yeah.
Like Like
This
with
is mine.
addiction or alcoholism, it was just a compulsion. I couldn't tell you why I did it.
Right.
It was just that I saw a thing. I wanted that thing. And I
So I
fucking
took
put
it.
it in my
gonna
pocket,
take
put it in
it,
my
yeah.
pocket,
Right.
my backpack, you know, whatever. But so anyway, kind of fast forward in the tape, right? To jump in, the way that I look at it, coming into recovery, and you know, I've got sober in the 12 steps of Cocaine Anonymous. Obviously, we work out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Right.
But you know, the big book talks about having an entire psychic change, and to kind of relate that back, I remember a lot of the kind of verbiage used when I was going through treatment and kind of, I guess, growing up in recovery, was, oh, you know, you're going to be able to get back to, you know, the person that you were before drugs and alcohol.
Right. And you're like, I don't want to be that
dude,
person.
I sucked. Yeah. So, you know, getting to experience that entire psychic change, right? Like in the past 8 years, I have by no means done this perfectly. And like anybody who knows me, I had a pretty good gap where I just, like, I'd stopped going to meetings and, you know, kind of sponsoring guys and whatever. And I did my best to keep up prayer and meditation and like have like a relationship with a higher power throughout that time. And look, for whatever reason, I was shown grace and I didn't have to get drunk or high. I don't know why. Today I still think I should have, but I'm able to like look back and there are things that materialized in my life, almost as a direct result of me having not been in the program for that time. And so for whatever reason, I was shown grace and the plan played out. Right. But even during, I say that to say is that I have had many moments throughout the past 8 years where I've grown pretty far away from God and have had some serious character defects like rear up. But even in my worst moments, and this is something that just occurred to me recently, is they are nothing like the person that I used to be.
Right.
like it's a whole new different bad guy, I guess
right.
is what I'm trying to say,
Yeah.
right? It is, and it's just so cool to see that and be able to like acknowledge
Right.
that.
Well,
Today.
let's talk about the actual addiction part of your story. Like,
Perfect.
so you're a kid and you're growing up and no big things, but you had the sticky fingers and
Yeah.
you had some character defects going
Yeah.
on. And then, how does that progress?
So, there's kind of a funny like saying, I guess, in like, and it's the secret ingredient is crime, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like I always liked to like if it was wrong, like hell yeah,
right.
and some friends and I talk about it today, and like a lot of places weed's becoming legal, and it's like fucking who cares? The secret
Right.
ingredient was crime,
Right.
And like drinking's cool, but like
Yeah.
fucking underage drinking was cooler, right?
Yeah, right.
The secret ingredient was crime. So like with the stealing stuff, and obviously there was a little bit of a rush there, and like doing things that kind of push the boundaries. And so, as far as drinking and drugs go, I did get a bit of a late start. I think the first time I was like drunk, aside from having a couple beers with my dad at an air show or whatever, was I want to say I was 14.
Okay.
But
late start, dude. That's not a late start, dude.
Well,
Jamie, pull up late starts.
No, but that's like when kids like have a tendency to,
I guess I just mean for an addict.
Right. Well, no. But even no, that's not true because, I started drinking, around 15, 16.
Yeah.
So, I was in your book, I was a late bloomer.
Super
as
late.
well.
Yeah.
So-
Fucking loser.
Yeah, right. Late start.
But so anyway, a lot of what kind of kept me away from venturing out in that was the fact that I was always like, hey, like you're fucking doing sports. Pardon my language. I don't know.
Yeah,
if we're
go
cool.
ahead.
Yeah, cool.
The
like
fuck,
you're,
dude? You talk to me, dude.
You're doing sports. You're playing music. Like you're doing something, right? And so for a while, that kind of kept me outside of like, I don't want to fucking go out and drink or smoke weed. Like,
Right.
we fucking got a game this weekend, right?
Right.
Something like that. And then I can remember the first time that I got drunk, and it just wasn't really my thing. Like, it was certainly great, but I didn't get that breath of fresh air that people talk about, because alcohol was just like, it tasted bad. It took a lot of effort to like get drunk.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, you're a big dude too,
exactly,
so
exactly.
your tolerance and
a lot of blood.
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
blood.
a lot
That
of
number doesn't go up too any too fast.
Right.
But so I can remember my first drunk, and I kind of came back from it, and I was like, man, I mean, cool.
Not
right?
your
But like,
vibe, yeah.
Yeah, and it was on a cruise too. So we got home and went back to life.
Right.
Went back to playing sports, playing music, being in school, and I didn't come back around to that for a while. Kind of casually here and there, just because I was a kid and that's what we're supposed to do.
Sure.
But I wasn't compulsive about it yet.
Right.
And so, somewhere along the line, like I fucking started smoking cigarettes. I don't know why. It was cool.
Right. Because you weren't
smoking cigs.
hold on, you weren't supposed to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
And I can remember, I think it was.
I'm not supposed to do this. That's exactly what I'm gonna do.
And I don't even know the timeline of the next kind of events, but this is within the span of high school. And we some friends and I would go longboard. Longboarding was big. Growing up in Northern Virginia, we had beautiful hills and well-paved roads. It was a nice area.
Longboarding being skateboarding.
Skateboarding, yeah, but they're a little bit longer. And kind of the purpose
How
is-
how
pleasure
diminished
cruise.
is your brain, dude? Longboarding is like super long boards, dude, with
Hey,
trucks
no,
that are way further apart.
Hey, I'm actually doing it for the audience sake, Chad. So,
Dude, it puts a longboard. Dude, who doesn't? Jamie, look up longboards.
There you
Jamie,
go.
Look
pull
up the
longboard.
ratio of people that know longboarding
So
versus not.
like skateboarding, but they're longer and
There
they're
you go.
faster.
Okay,
And you're not
cool.
really like. I mean,
Right.
there's tricks that you can do, but it's just a completely different thing, right?
It's a pleasure cruise.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a downhill.
Yeah. And so, we're out longboarding and just having like a great time. And I think I light up a cigarette. And at this time, I had a friend who, was smoking a lot of pot.
He was taking the pot,
Smoking a lot of pot.
Smoking the reefer?
Smoking the reefer.
right?
smoking them marijuana cigarettes.
Right.
I knew that, and we'd hung out for a while, and it was just at this point, up to this point, it just wasn't for me. I'd never tried it.
Right.
And this one night, like, he always used to razz on me for, like, smoking cigarettes. And I'm like, fucking. He's
Right.
like,
At least I'm not a
quit
pothead.
smoking cigarettes.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So something like that.
Right.
And, like, he's like, dude, fucking, if you're going to smoke, like, let's go smoke.
Let's
and
make
I'm
it
like,
count.
I'm like, you know what? Fine. And we go back to his house and we take a couple bong rips and we go out longboarding. And, like, dude, I can remember it clear as day the first time that I smoked pot. We're in my buddy's Jeep. It's a beautiful evening. Like, the sun is just going down, and I'm in the back, and the top's off, and the wind is blowing, and I'm thinking, like, I don't really feel it, because I took like one fat bong rip, and then we left, and just like from my back forward, I just start like tingling, and I'm like, yo,
Dude,
this is for me, right? And so, like, from there, like, I was off. Like, I stopped playing sports, and, like, this was the thing that I'm going to do. I'm going to fucking smoke weed and hang out with my friends.
Right. And longboard.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. And so, on time went, and I got into some legal trouble, and I was on probation for a period of time. And while I was on probation, a friend of mine, because, again, at this point, all I've ever done is smoke weed and drink, which for kids my age is normal. Yeah. Right?
Sure.
And a friend of mine, we're hanging out at the house, over at my house one night, and I had a friend who, like, got put on probation at the same time as me. And so, like, we were buddies,
we were
right?
probation buddies.
Yeah. It's like, we'll go out and we'll drink, but, like, we can't smoke pot. And, like, we keep each other from smoking pot so we can make sure we pass our drug tests.
Right.
And he had a friend that came over, and she had a bowl of something, and she lights it up and passes it to him, and he smokes it. And I'm like, yo, what are you doing? And he's like, no, it's not weed. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah. He's like, it'll get you high, but, like, it's not weed. You're not going to fail a drug test. And he passed me this K2, and I fucking, and I hit it. And, I mean, if you ever smoke K2, it's like weed.
I got a question. Was it like a time warp the first time you smoked it? Because the first time I really smoked, like, a blunt of it with some friends, I was in a car, and it was like time just didn't exist until it wore off. And then we had just been driving the whole time, and I was like, what the fuck
And
just
it was
happened,
like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very it's
right.
Very,
So
it's
well,
like weed,
and just to frame it for those that don't know, K2 is technically like plant material.
They take leaves of something
and then they
spray
shit on it.
And the original stuff was a chemical JWH something.
They spray it with Progeria. That's funny.
Yeah. But yeah, it's been manipulated over time. They keep adding molecules to stay ahead of the government, and then there's no trials on anything, so it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Right. And it's also legal, so they sell it at head shops.
It's legal until they catch up with a new chemical.
It's that it's not illegal yet.
And
it's always kind
well,
of
because like
Chad
Chad said, they constantly
It's just like fentanyl and everything else. They add an oxygen or hydrogen molecule to it, and then it's just
and then it's its
else,
own thing.
Yeah. And so it's just chemicals. And sure enough, like you don't fail a drug test,
right?
And you do get high.
Yeah.
And like that would change the game for me, because as much as it was like weed, dude, it gets you way higher.
And the original stuff smelled like burnt fish food, dude.
Dude, awful.
Yeah.
But so anyway, like we smoked K2 for a while, and I mean, dude, I was on probation for 6 months. It felt like a while, but within that time frame, I went from like casually smoking K2 to like smoking K2 all day, every day.
Yeah.
And every time I smoked it, I can remember clear as day the first time that this happened, but I took a hit of it, and I was doing something, and all of a sudden, like, my heart starts beating real fast.
Yeah.
And I think I sent my buddy a text, and I'm like, yo, I don't know what I said, but I'm like, yo, this is fucked up. Like, I feel like I'm having a heart attack.
Right.
And then basically what had happened was I had put my phone down, finished being high and feeling like I was going to die, and then just went to sleep. And I woke up in the morning, my mom busted through my bedroom door, and she's like, are you okay? Like, I got a text from Mitch. And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And I go and I look at my phone, and I see that from the past night, like I had like 15 missed calls, and like he texted me, and he's like, dude, I'm texting your mom, like, fucking not okay, you know? And so I'm like,
well, and it's crazy because like that's another thing that, you know, because it's not, you know, really regulated or they have no idea what the ingredients are or active ingredients are, is you can die from that shit.
Yeah.
Or because I've seen kids in recovery when I was working, hit the K2 because, of course, that exact reason you said.
You don't fail a drug test.
Well, you don't fail a drug test. But hey, guess what? We're going to call the EMTs for you.
Yeah,
you know. So it was like, the kid like ended up seizing out.
Yeah.
From hitting K2. So.
And a good lesson to learn, kids or anybody who's watching, is that if it says not for human consumption, it fucking means it, dude.
There's a reason for it.
Yeah. So anyway, like after that first instance, it almost like broke the seal on these like weird heart palpitations that I would get from K2, and they were happening more and more frequently. But like immediately after that first one, it was
right.
Then I started to get my very first.
Also, it's a learned behavior because what you do is you go, okay, this is what I was doing last time,
right?
And you learn.
And I know I'm going to be okay.
But you learn the panic attacks. It's the whole anxiety. Yeah. That's how it progresses.
Well, so anyway, from that first time is when I started to get my first taste of like, yo, why can't I stop doing this?
Right.
And I can remember it was towards the end of my probation. I think I had maybe a month left, and I was like, I need to stop doing this. I'm just going to fucking start smoking weed again. And I started smoking weed again. I was finally able to like not use K2 and feel like I was going to die. And two things happened, right? Like the last month of my probation, of course I got away with it because I've been good up until this point. I haven't failed a single drug test. I've been responsive to my PO. But weed just wasn't the same. And so that is when I started kind of expanding my horizons and really just doing whatever was in front of me.
Yeah.
Hallucinogens were kind of the first thing because, again, like the recreational, it's normal. But then on to like, all right, fucking painkillers and, benzos and
they call it
stuff like that.
They call it the drug ladder.
Yeah,
I've heard it put as that.
It's when I started climbing the drug ladder.
Right.
All the way to the top, right?
Yeah.
And kind of throughout that progression, like I had all of these barriers, right? Like, oh, well, I won't use opiates, or okay, I'm not going to snort anything.
Right.
Or,
you keep on erasing that line and moving it over.
moving it. And just the last line was like, I'm never going to, shoot up. And
I
so
think
like,
that's the last line for a lot of people is I'm never going to IV use.
Yeah, then once you hit that line and then you erase it, you're like, oh, I'll never be homeless and I'll never overdose and I'll never go to jail.
Then what you do is you throw cocaine in on top of it.
When the heroin stops working, dude, you got to throw the coke in it, baby.
Right,
Otherwise, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
So, a lot of stuff happened kind of throughout the using history from that point. But, like, as I climbed the ladder, of course, shit started to go south. I went to college. I was asked
shit started to go
leave.
south. I went to college.
Well, I went to college, and I was asked to leave pretty quickly.
What's the second person who's been asked to leave a school that's been on the show today?
West Virginia.
Okay.
WVU.
Were you playing sports then too?
No.
I
was just using drugs. I went to that school. I knew it was a big party school.
Okay.
And
we went to a party school, and they asked you to leave the party school. That's how hard you were going. Wow.
Man, I look back and I know that like everything happens for a reason, and I think it might be like the one real like regret that I have through all of this. But I didn't apply to a single other school.
Right.
At the time, I still had a good GPA and an outstanding SAT score.
Oh, wow.
And I only applied to like the biggest party school that was within a 5-hour drive of
right.
me. Yeah.
Did your parents say anything about that? Like, why don't you go ahead and try, maybe.
Well, I mean, like, dude, like we went on tours. We toured Virginia Tech. We toured UVA because those were like the good schools in the area.
Right.
And I didn't even put in applications. I was like, I'm going to WVU.
Right.
I'm gonna get
That's
in.
how it is.
Yeah.
Right.
But at the time, it was also at a point where it was very much like I don't think at the time knew the full extent of my using and drinking, but they knew that I was using and drinking.
Sure.
And they just wanted me the fuck out.
Right.
And so
yeah, we need a break.
Yeah.
Right.
And so because I can remember coming home from my first semester, and at this point, like I was pretty open about like, fucking, I'm a wreck, right?
Yeah.
And I want to stop and whatever. Dude, and the conversation was like, I mean, hey, stop, great.
Right.
Like, you're going back. Like, we can't have you at home.
Right.
Right. And, I went back until I got asked to leave. And then they had, of course, no choice but to
Right. So how did that happen? Like what at the party school? What did you do to cross the line?
Man, I mean
that where they found out and
so I was dating this girl.
I already like it.
At the time, it's so long ago that I don't even know how they found out or if I think they had drug tested me when I was home at some point. But I was dating this girl, and her brother had broke his femur, and so she was taking his painkillers and giving them to me. And then those ran out, and I started taking Xanax because I had somebody close by me that was getting a lot of Xanax, and I was just buying it at the time.
Were those press pills or were those actual pharmaceutical
Xanax?
Yeah.
And I got up to a point where I think I was taking 7 or 8 bars.
Oh, like 2 milligrams.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. The totem poles.
Yeah. And it was.
Chad's joke is I don't take Xanax.
I don't take Xanax. I just take bars.
Yeah. But it was getting to a point where like there was a period of time where all I would remember is I would wake up and it would already be like getting to the evening time because I'd taken so much Xanax I just slept through the whole day. I missed all my classes. So I'd wake up. I'd take a couple Xanax. I'd start walking up to my buddies to go like smoke weed and hang out, and then I would wake up, and then I would take some Xanax and I would start walking up to my buddies, and it was just
it was
cycle.
Like it was Groundhog's Day, but you were perpetually asleep.
And so it got to the point. Some friends of mine, who were also all using, right?
Yeah,
mind you, had this little makeshift intervention for me to try and get me to stop using Xanax. They had all of my connects cut me off and stopped selling Xanax to me. And so the only thing left for me at this time was there was a kid in my dorm who had a Vicodin prescription for his back. And he got to the point where he was like, because he was selling them for some time.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like I was a polite drug addict. I was never like, give me drugs, you know.
Right.
But he was like, man, I can't sell them. Like I need to take them because my back is like worse. And I was like, fucking okay, man.
Fuck you.
And at the time,
pussy.
So to back up, I had an experience when I went home for something, and some friends and I had gone on a camping trip, and we took a bunch of Molly, and we were out there, and one of my friends had brought some heroin. And so growing up north, it was powder. It literally looked like
shit.
It looked like BC powder. I can remember the first time that I saw BC powder down here, and I was like,
did it turn brown when it hit the water?
Heroin?
Did it turn like amber when it hit the water?
Man,
or was it generally clear?
Generally clear.
Yeah.
We were getting stuff straight out of Baltimore back then, but so he had a little bit of heroin. And he was like, "Oh, just try some," and I was like, "Okay, sure, I'll try it." And I took a small bump, and this was months prior.
Right.
I took a small bump, and I was already on Molly, so I didn't really feel too much. It kind of just took me down. I didn't get it, right?
Right.
But now at this point, I've been cut off. I've got no more prescription drugs that I can take.
Sure.
And I remembered that this dude that I was selling weed to that worked at the convenience store right by my dorm mentioned that he could get heroin.
Oh.
And I was like, man,
good to know. I'll
I
file that away.
Yeah, I was like, well, I didn't really like it when I tried it before, but
maybe this time
maybe if I did it again, like I would.
Maybe if I do a bunch.
Yeah. I was like, maybe if I did it again, I would get it. And so, me and all my friends, we decided that we would all try heroin, right?
All right.
I
like it.
Guys, I don't know what y'all are doing today, but I think we should come together as a pact and we should all try heroin.
Yeah,
right.
And we got this fucking heroin, and each of us got one, of these little folded up baggies. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And fucking, we go up to a buddy's apartment and we do them, and we're all like itchy and throwing up. And I don't know what they're thinking. I remember clear as day one of my buddies who previously had been a heroin addict who, up until this time, had not touched opiates. He was smoking weed with us. He was taking benzos, drinking, partying, right? But he hadn't touched an opiate since whenever, right? And I remember he was the first one. He snorted it. He went outside. He threw up. He came back in like itching, and he was like, oh, yeah, I remember why I love this.
Right.
And I start feeling it and like start itching, and I'm like, yo, this is the fucking stuff, right?
Right.
And I mean, man, it just progressed, and
another aha moment for you, like the weed. Yeah.
Exactly. So, one night I didn't have as much as would get me high, and a friend of mine suggested I shoot it, and I, told him to shoot it for me into my foot so I didn't have to I didn't have any track marks. And whatever.
Right.
This was like a one-time thing.
Yeah.
I'd never
of
snorted
course.
heroin again after
Right.
that.
Yeah.
I went out and bought a pack of rigs the next day and just started wearing hoodies in the summer.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Well, Chad's similar to that.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's where all this shit's from, baby.
Yeah.
well, but like, where? You did that. You progressed into heroin because it was accidental, right? Like
Well,
the
yeah.
cheese?
Somebody was just like, "Hey, dude, like, try this morphine powder," and it was
Right.
he had packaged it up in a kite, but it was cheese heroin made
Yep.
from tar.
Yep.
I also had the distinct pleasure in my lifetime of trying like white china, which was really fun. I wish that would have stayed around. That's
Yeah.
that's the kind of heroin you can have a shelf life with, like where you could do the shit for 20 fucking years
Yeah.
and not lose your fucking life.
Yep.
You know, or your veins or any of that stuff. But tar, dude,
So if
is
anybody wants
brutal.
to do
Yeah.
opioids, then
Well, that's very rare
do
that
the-
they have
do the
any
white
of that
China.
anymore
Right.
because it's all fentanyl stuff now.
Sure.
but
Yeah.
it's wild. But
It was
yeah,
like
dude.
starting to come around towards the end of my using. I look back and I'm like, man, I never had an overdose.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I'm grateful because I always had this rule where like I would push half the shot and then I would wait a couple minutes and then I would
Did
push
the
other half
same
the shot.
shit, dude.
Well, I never did it. I just had the rule.
Yeah.
And I mean, bro, I would pause for a split second.
Yep.
Okay, I'm not dead. I'm not
Yeah,
dead.
yeah,
And plunge.
Yeah, because you put a
right.
shit ton in it, and then you're like, all right, dude. Like, I know if I do this, there's a possibility I can die. So you push like a quarter to a half of it, and then you draw back, make sure you're still in, make sure you're still alive, and then you're like, oh fuck it, I'll be fine. That feels great.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
Yep. So, anyways, what winds up happening is one night, right? Like, at this point, my parents have kicked me out, and I've been just so I was car hopping, right? To kind of support my habit, going through cars and whatnot.
Sure.
They'd kicked me out, and I was this girl that I was dating. I was sleeping at her parents' house in the basement on the couch, and I'm like flat broke, right? And I know that this buddy of mine is up in Baltimore, like right now, picking up, right? And
Right.
I'm overdue for a trip to the pawn shop to sell the shit that's in the trunk of my car, right?
Mhm.
And I call him up and I'm like, yo, like, please tell me you're bringing some stuff back. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, let me know when you get back and we'll meet up. And I hop out and I get in my car and I start driving and I go into this 7-Eleven. And, one of the things, at least back then and in Virginia, the way that most of these gas stations were set up was like you have your counter here. So, like, if I'm sitting at the counter, this is the countertop. You stand right there.
Right.
And the cigarettes are all overhead.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
And so just the thing to do is you wait until they
borrow
walk to the
some
back.
cigarettes.
Yeah, walk in,
Right.
swipe a couple packs, walk out. You're good.
Right.
And it's late at night, and for whatever reason, it's just the strangest thing because I'd done this so many times
Well, you were
before.
already sticky fingers, dude.
Yeah. So I'd done this so many times before. For some reason, this 7-Eleven, middle of the night, there's nobody else there. I back my car in this parking lot and I leave it running and I like wait for this lady to get out of sight. And I
With
walk
stolen
in.
goods in your
Yeah,
trunk.
Yeah. And I walk in and I reach up and I grab a couple packs of cigarettes and I turn to walk out. And this lady, like, bro, she's up to here on me.
Yeah.
4 times my age.
Right.
Like, bro, I could have knocked this lady over and just gone.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, like in that moment,
Uh-huh.
I just didn't have the strength. And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. And I sit down and I just start like plotting, right? And I'm like, okay, as soon as she kind of steps away, I think I asked to like go to the bathroom at one point. I was writing bad checks out of fucking anybody's account whose checkbook I could get my hands on.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like if I found a purse in a car, I was writing bad checks out of my parents' accounts.
Oh, yeah.
All of it. And I had a couple bad checks on me. I asked to go to the bathroom. I don't know what I thought my plan was, but I'm like, all right, let me I think I stuck a couple of these bad checks in the trash can I don't know.
Okay.
I come back out. I sit back down. Another opportunity. Just go, get in the car, leave.
Uh-huh.
Right? And like just as I've worked up enough of this gusto or will or whatever to go, I see the cherries and berries pulling into the parking lot. And like it was almost this weird like the jig is up.
Cool.
Yeah.
A little bit of relief.
Yeah, man. They at that night I got arrested. I got charged with 3 counts of felony check fraud.
So why did they pull in? Why were they arresting you?
Because the lady called up for shoplifting.
No. They just pulled up because I was stealing cigarettes because I was shoplifting.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
And that's how they got notified from the lady.
Right.
Right.
And
Okay.
they asked to pat me down.
Right.
I said, sure.
Right.
Again, I don't know how the whole series of events went.
Right.
But it wound up
But you
with
had
me in
bad
jail.
checks on you, stolen goods, all kinds of incriminating
with like one
stuff.
count of shoplifting or misdemeanor petty larceny, whatever it was. 1 count of felony grand larceny, 3 counts of felony check fraud, and 3 counts of forgery.
Yeah.
For the bad checks that I had.
Forgery of financial instrument?
It was just
Is that-
forgery.
oh, yeah, 'cause
that was all
they're-
they gave me.
Chad was
I
a-
got forgery of finance. I had
Yeah.
several.
Chad
of
was
those, and then one of them stepped.
an accomplished
We're very similar.
forgery.
Yeah.
We're very similar.
Yeah. So, man, I basically I sit in jail like for the weekend, and I kind of fessed up to the heroin because, as they're like going through my car, they ask, is there anything that's going to poke me? And like the jig is up. So I'm
Sure.
like, there's needles in there somewhere.
Right.
They searched through my car. They found all the stolen shit that I had in there.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't find a single needle or
Oh,
any
wow.
drugs or anything like that. But I fessed up to it. So when they
Right.
bring me into jail and they book me in, they tell me, hey, we're not going to put you with everybody else because you're on drugs. There's a mandatory 72-hour hold. So I'm in this little, cell's half the size of this room.
Yeah.
Just shitting, vomiting, wanting a cigarette.
Oh,
coming
yeah.
off dope. For the weekend until I get arraigned and they arraign me. And, again, I don't remember the whole sequence of events, but I can
Sure.
remember being in jail and thinking that I don't belong there. And
Right.
these other prisoners, right, I've got all these track marks and I'm in such huge denial. And I remember one guy clear as day telling me I needed Jesus. And I was like, man, fucking, but it started kind of the gears turning.
Yeah.
And I'm like, fuck, man. So anyway, I had a bond hearing and the condition of my bond was just simply that I go to treatment and that I complete a 30-day treatment program.
Right. Okay, we're gonna lead off at that.
There you go.
Let's go to a commercial real quick.
Okay.
Max the Axe, the Lone Star Injury Attorneys. If you go to thisfinklawyer.com, it will take you to his website. Hit him up.
Or it
Max
won't.
the Axe.
Probably will, though.
He practices in Texas and California.
Maybe.
Personal injury attorney, great
Pretty
dude,
sure.
and sponsor of our lovely
He has a good
podcast.
name.
Max the Axe.
He has a good name. It rhymes.
Yeah,
It rhymes. It's a
Yeah.
name that rhymes. He has a good name.
it does.
I said it. Kelly
does.
didn't say it. Max, if you're listening, Kelly didn't say it. I said it.
Well, Max actually told me his name, and that people
You said
call
that
him
2 episodes ago.
Max the Axe.
But I still don't believe you.
Okay, well, fair enough. There we go.
Jamie, pull up Max the Axe.
yeah,
Pull up
right.
Did he tell Kelly or
Hey,
not?
Chad, pull up our new music. We actually have some songs out on Spotify and also some free downloads. So
Yeah, so
we've
if
got
you like it,
somewhere.
I made it. If you don't, Kelly made it.
There we go.
The only thing tonight that we have is us. We're just gonna let this one ride. We're just gonna let this one ride.
Gonna take my time. I have all the time in the world to make you mine. It is written in the stars above.
All right. Those are out. Actually, now like the Depeche Mode is streaming, or actually free download on my SoundCloud. So if you go to soundcloud.com/Kelly Reverb, you can download it there. And then also on we've got some other tracks streaming on Spotify. So check our stuff out. And then Chad has a little PSA.
I just have to give the biggest shout out in the entire United world to the entire United world, the greatest artist and songbird of the entire United world and the history since the beginning of time, and that is number 1 to Madonna. Oh fuck, I love Madonna. And number 2, I gotta give a big shout out to Tom Thumb, because without Tom Thumb I would not have a lot of groceries in my lifetime, because Tom Thumb is the best store. And then number 3 to Depeche Mode, because they did such a good job on their music and inspired the beeps and the boops from so many people in between the time of then and now. So thank you to all those 3 things, but especially Tom Thumb and Madonna. Oh fuck, it's so good.
Chad needs his attention.
Yeah, of course.
But anyway, okay, so you had just gotten arrested for the first time.
Yeah.
I liked the term I had never heard, cherries and berries.
Oh, yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, the Reds and Blues,
Yeah,
baby.
yeah. But so you had gotten arrested and then incarcerated, right?
Yeah,
or
yeah.
and,
I
and
briefly-
basically kicking
Yeah, yeah.
in prison for
Yeah.
72 hours.
Jail.
Honestly,
Mandatory hold.
Yeah, honestly, and I'm gonna just give a little bit of my opinion in here. Is fucking dude, 3 days in jail kicking dope. I wasn't even thinking about kicking dope. I was thinking about how the fuck I needed to get out of jail
Yeah.
and smoke a cigarette.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So man,
Kicking
I see
dope's a lot
motherfuckers-
easier in your jail, dude.
Dude, I see motherfuckers wasting months at a time coming, weaning themselves off with Suboxone, and I'm like, fucking, just spend the weekend kicking and be done with it.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
But that's just my opinion.
Right.
So I'm gonna fast forward a little bit, right? So I'm in treatment. All right. So kind of my step one, right? While I'm there, I'm still not wanting to like be sober.
Right. And I
But
think that's important that you say that because you can, I always tell somebody, you can't make somebody want to be sober.
Well-
I can't make you want sobriety.
And I say that in part because of this, and I've always heard kind of recovery and sobriety and working the steps, right, as kind of being analogous to working out and eating clean, right? And what I mean by that is it doesn't matter. Say I want to lose 20 pounds. It doesn't matter how much I want to lose 20 pounds. If I
Right.
don't go to the gym and I don't eat clean, I'm just not going to lose that 20 pounds.
Right.
On the flip side of that, it doesn't matter how much I want to fucking keep that 20 pounds on. But if I go to the gym and I start working out and I start eating clean, it's just going to go.
Right.
And so, I had this experience where, like, despite not wanting to be sober and to get sober, like, I worked the steps and, I almost did it at first kind of as just a means of killing time while I was
Right.
in treatment, right? I had an experience where, I saw Stickman, which is, the vicious cycle of addiction, and I was
Sure.
able to, like, see me in that, but I still didn't quite get it.
Right.
And then I had an experience where in treatment I got high, and something happened and it just like clicked and it was like, oh yeah, like I
right.
thought, because I came into treatment thinking like, hey, this will at least
Hey,
be
so
like a
for
30-day tolerance
when you
break.
say Stickman, explain that so people at home will know
So
what that is.
Stickman's a little exercise that a lot of people do, and I really like it for doing going in and speaking in treatment centers, right?
Sure.
To kind of demonstrate what being an alcoholic is. And it starts with this guy in the middle, and we'll put a little doodle up there, make the guys laugh, right? A
Right.
needle in one hand, a bottle in the other.
Right.
He's frowning, not having a good time. And, we talk about how we have an allergy. And it's this phenomenon of craving. And, one's too many, 1,000's not enough.
Right.
Kind of like Doritos, right? But, so it helps to kind of see, like, okay, so this is what is bodily wrong with me. And I
Right.
can see, okay, everybody's calling out their own consequences and we're listing them up down under the body side. That like, oh, we're fucking going to jail. Our families don't love us anymore. We've ruined relationships with friends. A lot of people have legal trouble. A lot of people have, familial trouble. The list goes on.
Sure.
Right. And kind of the point to this stick man is like any normal person, take a DWI, for example, would get a DWI and say, man, maybe I've got to stop drinking, but an alcoholic will get one and say, man, I got to stop driving.
Right.
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 But so like we keep going and of course, down towards the bottom there, at some point we get stopped and we emerge remorseful with this firm resolution. And again, so far everybody, if not most people, are
Right.
on board with that, right? Like, yeah, I get that. I've done that too. Because these are their answers we're using, right?
Right.
And then over on the mind, we talk about the lies that we tell ourselves, right? Like, I'm just going to smoke weed again. It's not as bad
I'm
as
going to
K2.
dial it back, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shit like that. Or as long as I'm not using intravenous drugs, I'm okay.
Right.
And some lie, and then at some point, like, we buy that and we use the first drink, and again, the cycle goes on and on.
Right.
The spirit's down there at the bottom in between the body and the mind with being restless, irritable, and discontented. Unless we can at once experience the sense of ease, which comes by drinking
A psychic
few drinks.
change.
Yeah.
Right.
So, it just kind of helps. It's a visual aid to help people who might not know
Sure.
what being an alcoholic really is,
Right.
diagnose themselves.
Right.
And so I see it, I diagnose myself, but I still don't quite get the gravity, and then I get high in treatment, and I'm like, oh, fuck, like, I get it.
Yeah. Now you relate.
Yeah. And so, man, like, that was just enough. I still didn't want to be sober, but it was enough for me to, like, ask the guy who had been coming on Saturday nights from firing line a Cocaine Anonymous group, to be my sponsor, right? And he starts taking me through the steps real quick. And again, I'm just doing it like, hey, this will kill some time, right?
Sure.
And dude, I look back and it's so many points like God was doing something for me that I couldn't even fathom, even begin to do for myself. And I'm not even talking about huge miracles working in my life. I'm talking about me being such a bullheaded 19-year-old kid that just wanted to go home and get high. And I meet some girl in treatment, and she's talking about wanting to stay in Texas. So I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to stay too, so I can buy myself another couple days at this treatment center with her.
Right.
And I kind of back myself into a corner, and then like, oh, fuck, time's up, and I haven't found like an Oxford house that I want to go and live at. And
Right.
what's been found for me is a place called Chapter House, which is a basically long-term treatment.
I have worked at Chapter House.
Chapter House is a phenomenal program.
I worked at Chapter House, in Richardson. All three
Yeah.
houses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
It's like
was-
a burning tree kind of
Yeah.
model.
I was,
Yeah.
man, I don't know what number I was, but it was within the first 20.
Right.
Like the first client was
graduating,
at
yeah.
the first house.
Yeah,
that I
yeah.
was
Heidi and
there with. Yeah.
Was Doug there? Was Doug running it?
No, Doug wasn't there.
okay.
I mean, Mike was like running it at
Right.
this point because it was like new. It was
Yeah.
it was his
Heidi and
venture.
Mike,
Yeah. But yeah, there were a lot of guys that I went through there with. Some are not around today. Some
Yeah.
are.
Well, I mean, some of even in recovery, that's what's scary and serious about recovery is I mean, there are fatalities.
Yeah.
Man,
Oh, yeah.
and that happens all the time. I mean, Chad, you see it all the time with sponsees, and I'm sure you have too.
Of the guys that I went through Chapter House with, fewer are still sober today than have died. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, you start getting to that
Dude,
percentage
yeah,
of successful
Yeah.
recovery
and
gets really small.
And the rest of
Yeah.
them are somewhere in the middle as
Yep.
far as like they moved, just started doing the normal thing.
Right.
or clinging on to that idea, Some are sober again, sure.
Sure.
But, whatever. Anyway, so I keep getting myself backed into these corners. And in hindsight, like it's all God, right?
Uh-huh.
Like I meet a girl, I want to stay in Texas. Now I'm backed into going to Chapter House. And so,
Well, and
I'm
Chapter
told-
House is like it's like a what you can 2-year program if you want it, or
the
if your
time-
if your parents can afford it.
At the time, it was 9 months.
Yeah.
Ish.
Yeah.
And what I was told going in was that it was just a 90-day commitment. And I get there, and of course, they
Oh,
take
by
my
the way,
phone
it's
back.
9 months.
Yeah, they take my phone back.
Right.
And I'm like, yo, this is bullshit. I was lied to. And, I calm down, and I'm like, all right, fucking, you got me. I'll
Right.
stay for the 90 days. But
Right.
after that, I'm out.
Right.
And I can remember all the phone calls with my parents and
Supervised
that
phone
being-
calls too.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Right.
But they were always, hey, like, just finish the program. And I'm
Right.
like, nope, 90 days. Like, I'll do my 90 days.
Yeah.
I was almost like needlessly bringing it up. Like, hey, just in case you haven't forgot.
I'm only here for
yeah, I'm
90
only
days.
here for 90 days and
I'm
then I'm out.
checking out,
Dude,
dude.
something so bizarre happened at like 85 days.
Uh-huh.
There was this kid that was there, and he was well liked in the community.
Mm-hmm.
He had a sponsor. He was working steps, and outwardly he was doing really well. And we'd done this camping trip. His family had this 6,000-acre ranch up in Oklahoma, and we
Mm-hmm.
went out there and we camped for the weekend, and it was just beautiful, right? We smoked cigars, we fucking rode four-wheelers, went
Mm-hmm.
kayaking, canoeing. It was awesome. And somewhere around anyway, this experience happened at 85 days, maybe 2 weeks before. He'd hit his 90 days
Mm-hmm.
and just left. And in that 2-week span, nobody saw him, nobody
Mm-hmm.
talked to him. People were reaching out to him. Nobody heard back from him. He wasn't at a single meeting. And something about that 2 weeks later is I was just like, I fucking don't want to be that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Because at this point now, like I'm a part of this community. Like I love these guys.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, dude, I remember the phone call. My ma was in tears. I'm in tears too, right? Like I very much am a crier, and I get it from my ma. But I call up and I'm like, fuck it, I'll do it. Like I'll stay and I'll complete the program. And so little by little, right? Like I come to Texas, I'm going to do my 30 days and I'm out. And I'm going to do this 90 days and then I'm out. And then I'm going to do this program and then I'm out. And towards the end of my stay at Chapter House, I'd met a guy who, had a sober house, and he was like, hey, come and live here, right? And I was like,
Right.
okay, I'll move in, and but I'll stay long enough that I can pick up a year, and then I'm out. And then I think it was like we talked about like just doing like a 6-month lease, and I was like, okay, so I'll stay that 6 months and then I'm out, and that was like a little bit past a year, and just like bit by bit, this like all of the barriers that I put up, similarly to with drugs, but in a different way, they were being broken down for me, right? Because I was putting up these barriers of like, I'm here for 90 days, or I'll stay until I can pick up a year chip, and then it's been 8.5 years, and I'm just a Texan.
Well,
you know
that's
what
great.
I mean?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it, man.
Yeah.
So like, what do you like when somebody comes to you or asks you, like, you know, what advice do you give people, you know, that from your experience?
Oh, man, that's such a tricky question. Because, so here's the thing, man, is usually the people that I have coming to me from a not sober or from a need a sponsor standpoint, more often than not, and I say this because I had this kind of realization, right? Like I had this time outside of the program, and I came back in. And, you know, there were kind of some things, and I got to this point where it's like, okay, be the change, right? And one of the things that I had previously done a lot of was these H&Is, going and speaking at rehabs. I remember, like, my first couple of years being, like, on fire every week.
Yeah.
Fucking, we had, like, two of them. We'd go in there like a gang,
Captain AA.
and beat recovery into these guys, right? And I'm like, well, fuck, why I'm just not doing any of those.
Right.
Like, yeah, I'm going to a meeting, and I'm, you know, maybe sharing, and I'm like, sure, I'm willing to sponsor, but fucking, if I'm not, like, going into these places, like, am I really carrying the message? And so there's a place, it's Cinecore now, but it was Turtle Creek, and it was down there.
Sure.
And it's, man, I'd been kind of stewing on this, like, I need to do H&Is again for a couple weeks, and it was a Wednesday, and I knew that we did Turtle Creek on Wednesday nights, and something about, like, this whole day that I was having, just, it wasn't a bad day. I'm just like, I need to do an H&I tonight. It was just this persisting thought in the back of my mind that I almost, like, tried to push out, right?
Right.
And I called the guy, and I'm like, the guy that was doing Turtle Creek at the time, and I'm like, hey, you know, I'll come tonight, right? You know, don't expect me at the time. I'm still kind of giving myself a safety net. I'm like, I don't, I'll probably be there,
right?
But at this point, I'm fairly committed,
right?
And
85%.
Yeah, I called up a friend of mine that, you know, we've done a lot of H&Is together. And I'm like, hey man, do you want to go? And he's like, oh, I got this other thing going on, you know. Plus, you know, not really my crowd, and it kind of gets me thinking. And I'm like, man. Like, coming from my background, like, Turtle Creek really isn't my crowd. Right. Like, I had an easy upbringing. I've been technically homeless. Right. But I've never been homeless. Sure. You know what I mean? And I call up this other buddy, and I'm like, hey, man, do you want to come? And he's like, oh, man, I can't. And, like, we just start talking, and I start kind of sharing my, like, yeah, it's not really my crowd. I just kind of feel like I need to do an H&I. You know, I don't think that, like, you know, these guys are, like, down the hole, right? Like, I don't know if they're going to hear what I have to say because I'm just some punk kid who never had it hard and fucking got sober easy or early. Yeah. And he just, like, simply challenged me. He was like, how do you know? And fucking that got me. And then the thought immediately came through my head that was like, man, maybe these guys don't need to hear me, but, like, I fucking need to go regardless. Yeah. And, dude, I've been doing that every week for the past few months now, and I fucking absolutely love it. And, like, so point being is, you know, these people that are usually, like, coming to me, if anybody, you know, if there's ever any question of, like, what do I do? I'm in this position. It's, hey, get a sponsor and work the 12 steps. Right. That is the only reason that I am here today. Right. Right. Is just grace, you know? So, I mean, I hope that answers the question. No, yeah. But that's the only thing. Like, there is no advice. It is get a sponsor and work the steps. Right. And, like, grow closer to a power greater than yourself. I mean, that's the thing. Like, you know, I just like to hear advice because, you know, like I said, you know, there's no one way to become an addict, and then there's no one way for people to recover. Right. But I think, you know, like, I've said before, like, the 12 steps are a great blueprint for that. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, it can work. Yeah. It can work if you work it. Yeah. It's always been, I'm a big analogy guy, and another one that I heard a while back was it's almost like building a house. Right. And so it's like, if I decide I want to build a house with my bare hands, like, what I'm probably best like what I should do is probably find somebody who's built a house with their bare hands,
Right.
and ask them,
Yeah.
hey, can you show me how to build a house with my bare hands?
Right.
And they're gonna show me exactly what was shown to them as far as how to build a house with their bare hands.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And by the end of it, I've built this house with my bare hands, but there's all these other guys out here
Right.
that don't fucking know that, hey, you can build a house with your bare hands.
Right.
And I'm so fucking excited about this because it really wasn't all that complicated.
Yeah.
And so it's just a duty
Sure.
to go out there and teach somebody how to build a house with their bare hands. It's
Yeah.
like that's
Yeah.
all. I love that.
Sure.
And that's just all.
Well, and then also
Like sponsoring guys
you're because it looks like you're definitely a goal person. So you're
Yeah.
like a 30, 90, but it looks like you
Yeah.
have a 5-year goal now
I
to
do.
be airline pilot.
That is the goal. That is the goal. Obviously I have a felony. So what wound up happening was they dropped the check frauds and the forgeries, and they convicted me of grand larceny. So oddly enough, the charge that I had and the charge that I got convicted of was grand larceny, but it was theft over $200, not from the person.
Okay.
And that it's a tricky spot because it's a conviction that in Virginia now is no longer a felony, right? They've raised the number up to
Right.
1,000. But so a lot of things, even just in the past year, have kind of materialized around that. Number one being is that it's just kind of come to light that that specific thing is not the barrier that I thought it was to being an airline pilot. Right?
Right.
Like part of why I haven't done this sooner is because I thought like, oh, hey, I'm a felon. I
Yeah.
you know, but there's a lot of things. So another thing is I this past year filed a petition to have my gun rights reinstated.
Okay.
And it was something that
Well, you're in Texas, dude.
yeah, well, but even in Texas,
Yeah.
Texas is one of those harder states that
Yeah.
if you have had your gun rights taken from you,
Yeah.
I guess they make it pretty hard to get back. Virginia's
Right.
usually pretty tough on people, so I'm surprised it was this easy. I didn't get a lawyer until like I had my court date, and then I called somebody up and I was like, "Hey, do you think there's any way that I
Yeah.
could appear electronically?" And because to file you got to mail it, and my
Right.
court date's now in like 2 weeks because I've sent
Right.
in this petition. The Commonwealth's attorney has sent me a letter back. They said, yeah, no objection. I called them up. I said, hey, is this the thing that does it? And they're like, no, you need to file a civil motions precipice and come here and appear in court. And I'm like, okay. And this nice paralegal with the Commonwealth's office says, I'm going to draft this up for you and send it to you, sign it, send it back to me, and I'll file it
Cool.
like, right now.
Right.
And I'm like, great. Then I call this lawyer. I'm like, hey, what do you think? He says, it's not really something they do anymore, post-COVID. But he says, you really should have legal representation, $500 flat retainer, since
Right.
you've pretty much done the hard part, right?
Right.
The only other thing I showed up, he had a court order already drafted up, signed, stamped, delivered, gun rights fully reinstated.
Okay.
Holy
with
shit.
no restrictions
Right.
in the United States anywhere, of course, pending
Right.
some silly laws and regulations in states like California, Massachusetts, stuff like that.
Right.
I can walk into a store and purchase a handgun. And that's,
What's the point of owning
what do you mean?
a handgun? Or owning a gun? Is it just something personal you wanted?
Yeah,
or?
it's fun to shoot. It's self-defense.
Right.
There's a lot of reasons.
Sure.
Right.
Gotcha.
But it's one of those things that I just never could do, and I never thought I would be able to do.
Right. And you
Right?
can.
Being a convict,
Right.
because I didn't get any deferred. I got a felony conviction. It was
Right.
the silliest thing.
Yeah.
I remember my court date. Where
So
I
it
got
sounds
sentenced.
like magically barriers are being removed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the next thing that I did was I filed for a simple pardon, I think is the next thing. That's still kind of waiting in limbo. But what I found out in this process is that Virginia next passed a bill, and it goes into effect in September 10th of 2025, so next year.
Right.
Virginia is not a state that expunges anything. And they just passed a bill last year that will
Right.
allow for expungement of certain things.
The Expungement Act.
Something like that. I don't know. Some things will be automatic. Some
Right.
things you'll have to meet a certain criteria and have a
Well,
court date
you're
for.
on your way because you said what, 8.5 years now? You said you've had clean time.
Yeah.
Almost
Yeah,
9.
not almost 9.
Well,
huh?
so funnily enough, this bill goes into effect like 10
on
days.
your 9.
10 days at part of the criteria is that 10 years must have passed from the date that I was convicted.
Right.
Is it 10 or 7? It's whatever the
Right.
number.
Yeah,
Whatever
but
the,
it's close to
Whatever the
that,
number
right,
is
yeah.
for me to meet that criteria. comes 2 weeks before this law goes
Right.
into effect. So I mean, I look at
Yeah,
that and I'm
it's
like,
weird.
this is fucking God.
Yeah, it's kinda-
man.
yeah.
This is
Yeah.
not something that like these are very real. Like, things are materializing.
There's too
Yeah.
many coincidences.
Tangibility.
happening.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's too many coincidences.
And like by all
happening.
means, as a convicted felon, like I've built a good life for myself, but
Yeah.
like it's unbelievable to me the things that are beginning to materialize. That
Yeah.
like, oh shit, I can just be not a
Yeah.
convicted felon.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And doing all this, while
Yeah.
helping people with, spreading the message.
Yeah.
So, but we are at that time.
Oh,
so,
man.
I mean, did you have something important you needed to say, or?
Dude,
I mean, I think you said it. I think you said it. I think it was very insightful, and I appreciate you,
Yeah.
your candidness and sharing,
Yeah.
with the audience out there.
Yeah. I'll say there's so much more to the after getting sober part that I wish we had more time to elaborate on. But, dude, the miracles that materialize are not anything that I could do on my own.
Yeah.
And it is only a result of me having gotten a sponsor and worked the 12 steps.
Yeah,
So,
and I think Chad
Yeah.
would echo that as well.
Yeah,
right?
I agree with that. I did. I had like a lot of PTSD and other issues too. So
Yeah.
I'm a big advocate on like therapy that works in conjunction with 12 steps. But it is by far like the single greatest gift that I've been able to get very freely.
yeah,
And I try to give it away as much as possible as well.
got to give it away to keep it.
Fucking
Right.
evolution, man.
Yeah.
We didn't know that fucking stones were something to build a hut out of until one guy did it and told the next guy.
That's right.
and he did it with his hands.
Yeah, he did it with his hands.
know what I
and he
mean?
showed the next guy. Yeah,
Right.
that's all we're
So-
doing.
Well, I just wanted to say thanks for coming out,
Yeah,
dude.
man.
I appreciate you
Yeah,
sharing.
thank y'all for having me.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
That was
And
fucking killer.
And then we got Jeff Rigdon coming up sooner than later, but then
Sometime next week.
Next week, I don't remember. Somebody
Just kidding. It's like 3 days from now.
Yeah, right.
In your
Somebody
time on
get-
YouTube, it'll be weeks from now.
That's right.
Time is no longer linear for people like
thanks-
us.
Thanks for coming on, Mike.
Yeah,
And
happy to be
Chad,
here. Thanks for
always
having me.
thanks for coming out. Be sure, like, subscribe, all that mumbo jumbo. And remember, kids, there is no magic pill for sobriety, because if there was, we would all take too many.